Electroencephalography. Before studying about electroencephalography, just a recap of the structure of the neuron that we studied in unit. This is the basic structure of a neuron. It consists of dendrites that receive information from other neurons and sensory receptors. A cell body that receives information from dendrites, and if enough stimulation is received, the message is passed on to the axon. The axon carries neurons' message to other body cells. The terminal buttons of the axon form junctions with other cells and release chemicals called neurotransmitters. Next is communication between neurons. Neurons communicate by two ways. One is electrical communication and the other is chemical communication. Electrical communication. Neurons, when excited, generate action potentials. When an action potential is initiated in the neuron, it is propagated down the axon to the axon terminus where it can be transmitted to other neurons. Action potentials travel down the axon like a wave of energy. Next is chemical communication. The connection between two neurons is shown in the first figure and the expanded part is explained here. The space between two neurons is called synapse or synaptic cleft. The information must be transmitted across the synapse to other neurons via the neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are released from the vesicles and then attached to receptors located on the postsynaptic neuron. These neurotransmitters are in contact with the dendrite of the postsynaptic neuron. And in this way, the communication between two neurons takes place. Next is electroencephalography or EEG is a recording of electrical activity along the scalp. EEG measures voltage fluctuations resulting from ionic current flows within the neurons of the brain. EEG was first measured in humans by Hans Berger in 1929. Among the basic waveforms recorded from our brain, the important waveforms are alpha, beta, theta and delta rhythms. Now we can study what are the peculiar features of these different types of waveforms. Alpha waves. Alpha waves occur at a frequency of 8 to 12 cycles per second, and they are present only when you are awake but have your eyes closed. They disappear when you open your eyes or start mentally concentrating. Next is beta waves. Beta waves occur at a frequency of 13 to 30 cycles per second. They are usually associated with anxiety, depression or with the use of sedatives. Next is theta waves. Theta waves occur at a frequency of 4 to 8 cycles per second. They are most common in children and young adults. It can also be seen in meditation. Delta waves. Delta waves occur at a frequency of 0.5 to 4 cycles per second. They generally occur only in young children during sleep. It tends to be the highest in amplitude and the slowest waves. These are the EEG recordings of a person under different conditions. Next is EEG. The EEG signal can be picked up with electrodes either from the scalp or directly from the cerebral cortex. The peak-to-peak amplitude of the waves from the scalp is less than 100 millivolt and from exposed brain is 1 millivolt. The nature of the wave varies over the different parts of the scalp. The different types of EEG electrodes are divided into two. One is needle electrode and the other is surface electrode. Surface electrodes are again divided into flat electrodes and cup type EEG measurement. There are two systems of electrode placement for EEG measurement. One is 10 to 20 international system that includes 21 electrodes and 10 to 10 international system that includes 64 electrodes. In clinical practice, a standard pattern called 10 to 20 electrode placement system is generally used, which depends upon the distance between specified points on the scalp. And this is the structure of the brain, and the brain is divided into 4 different lobes. One is frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe and temporal lobe. The electrodes are placed in different positions of these 4 different lobes. And this is the electrode configuration or electrode placement under 10 to 20 system. The letter F represents the frontal lobe, C represents the central lobe, P represents the parietal lobe and O represents the occipital lobe. Odd numbers represents the electrodes that are placed on the left hand side of the brain, and even numbers represent the electrodes that are placed on the right hand side of the brain, and Z represents the electrodes that are placed on the midline of the brain. One electrode is also placed as the reference electrode for the measurement. And this is the block diagram of EEG recording setup. The signals obtained from the electrodes are given to the amplifier section, and in the amplifier section the signals obtained are amplified and filtered, and the signals are given to an analog to digital converter through a computer, and it is given to the EEG recording system.